I learned Formline 26 months ago. So starting out with that statement should calibrate your expectations. You're not talking to or learning from a lifelong practitioner of Formline design. However, I will say that I did the thing that I think that every person has to do if they're going to do this, and that's spend a lot of time drawing. I'll illustrate it with a story that happened not too long after that first class. Sealaska Heritage Institute, during the pandemic, made a Formline class available via Zoom. And I, being on their mailing list, I was like, yes, I could finally get some formal training on something that I've been looking at for some years. And even when I was in architecture school, I tried to do some Formline-y things on a project that I was assigned. But, I never really knew. And I took that class with Robert Mills, who is an artist from Cake, and has some fantastic work on display up in the Juneau area. And he's a carver and artist and sculptor. And if you ever get up there to Juneau and near the bridge that goes over to Douglas, there's a big fountain that's a whale. Well, just towards town, about 100 yards from there, is a metal sculpted canoe with Formline designs on it, and that's Robert Mills' work. It's fantastic work. He's a fantastic artist and a really good teacher. That's where I started. But the story that I'll illustrate with is I was in my first month or so of Formline work, and I think that the way that you can learn, and what you'll learn from me, is just like the basics, as the name of the class implies. But I looked at designs, and then I'd try to emulate those designs, or just straight copy those designs as practice. And then I would give myself challenges, like I want to try and make this or do that. And so each night I would draw. And I remember one night early on in the first month or so, my wife coming and saying, well, I'm going to bed now. And then I said, yeah, I'll be in a couple minutes. And then she gets up to go to the bathroom some time later. It didn't seem like that long. And she says to me, you have to work tomorrow, so you should get to bed soon. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. What time is it? And she says, 3 o'clock. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute. What time did you go to bed? And she says, 10 o'clock. So that was 5 hours. And giving myself credit for only being a designer in Formline, as somebody who has learned been taught. It's only 26 months, but I have put in a lot of time on it. And I think that all of the teachers will tell you that, as it is with just about any other thing, you've got to put in the time. Now, the basics are pretty simple. And so without anything further on that, I'll go ahead and jump into my slideshow. And I'm going to share the screen. And we're going to go to the Formline Basics slideshow and share that. And slideshow, boom. Here we go. So I already mentioned one of the people on here, but I want to say a huge thank you to Sealaska Heritage Institute, who facilitated some of the classes that I've been able to take, as well as the Ketchikan Totem Heritage Center, who facilitated other classes that I was able to take. Robert K. Mills was the teacher of the first class that I was in, the beginning Formline class. I learned also kind of an intermediate advanced class, is what the title of it was, with David A. Boxley, who is a phenomenal Formline designer, as well as his son that's at the bottom of this list. Abel Ryan was also a class that I took via Zoom. Those first 3 names via Zoom, with the organizations at the top sponsoring them. And then I want to put in a real plug for, you can find these on YouTube. Steve Brown, who has huge career in this art. And David R. Boxley, who is one of the best Formline designers out there. Those two, there are videos where they are teaching their Formline basics class. And those masters are people who you can't help but learn from. You're getting a pretty concentrated version from me of the basics. I think Steve Brown's is about 4 hours of just talking, which doesn't leave a whole lot of, and demonstrating on a chalkboard, actual chalkboard. That's how old the video is, but it's very good. And David R. Boxley's is like 4 class sessions. So those are really very good, and those can support you as you advance. So where does this name come from? Formline is a name that we are all calling it to this day, or at this time that everybody calls it that, Formline, this design. You see the cover of this book, and those are Formline designs. These designs come from, and this name comes from, not the designs, but the name comes from University of Washington professor Bill Holm, who wrote this book. This says 50th anniversary edition. He coined the term in about 1965. So as a researcher and a person who studied this art form for it was essentially his life's work, and the area where they continue the research of this work in Seattle at the University of Washington Burke Museum. It's called the Bill Holm Center, a very, very influential individual. And this book, if you want to have a fantastic resource for Formline and many things about it, there really isn't a better just fundamentals book than this. It's not entirely, it really isn't a how-to book, but it's got all of the forms and shapes in it, and an awful lot of writing that comes from a very credible background. Okay, so we're jumping right into it. Now, in that said, when Bill Holm began to name these forms, he named them, I don't know what his process was for naming them. What I do know is that as I have talked with artists and elders and whoever I could ask to possibly answer the question for me, what did the ancestors call these? Nobody has an authoritative answer, because nobody knows. That information seems to be lost. However, in talking with my Tlingit language teacher, I have asked him to give me some advice on what we might call these. And this was 2 months ago. I asked Hune, who's you might know by his English name, Lance Twitchell. Hune, what I'm going to be teaching this class in Sitka. I would like to use Tlingit terminologies in parallel to the terminologies that Bill Holm has coined. So what can I do? And he says, well, I've got a list of words for you, because Hune is also a good artist and knows an awful lot of people. So I'm starting with this one, the ovoid, which is what Bill Holm calls them. In Tlingit, at least this working list of names, and these are all, suggestions or ideas. And for me, it just feels good to me, because I am a Tlingit artist, a beginning Tlingit artist, and I really like any way that I can to incorporate the language. So wok is the word for its eye. So that's how Hune and these other folks came up with this idea of what we could call this, wok. And so that is the primary basic form. Now, as I refer to these, and is this thing covering? Oh, there we go. We get that. Okay. So as I refer to these different parts, there are two really important parts to the ovoid, the wok, is the top corner and the bottom corner. And now's the time to begin just like really observing these forms and getting a sense in your mind, which you probably already do, for what an ovoid looks like. And we see the top corner and the bottom corner have different types of curvatures to them. The ovoid itself, this one is one that one that I drew. I am very particular in my preferences for these, and I'm going to talk through this. But one thing I want to get into your mind that I think is really valuable, there's an artist who I think is really fantastic at this. Her name is Alison Bremner, who does fantastic Formline. And so I'm very influenced by hers. It's heavier. This is more of a Tlingit type of Formline. If you look at Haida Formline, there are thinner lines. But it has a great posture. This thing looks like it's standing up strong. Those two sides, while they have definitely a continuous curvature to them, they are very erect in posture. I really like that. I think that it makes for a bolder, stronger form line to do that. And sometimes I'll see, and I'm not going to give counter examples, but I will see examples of ovoids that seem a little bit smashed, like somebody stepped on them. They don't have good posture on the side. So real heavy emphasis on that. That top corner, there's a word, this kinde awaksha. So kinde awaksha is the, basically we're saying it's the top corner of its eye. It's that upper curve. And then yinde, kinde and yinde, or above and below. Yinde awaksha is the bottom corner of its eye. And so those are elements that you want to, definitely have those in your mind. And sometimes that the actual shapes could escape your mind, and you'd be thinking about like, well, how can I remember that without looking at a picture? I'm going to give you a trick to that I discovered, and nobody has ever said it before, that I found, and I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes when we start practicing ovoids. So then the next forms, there's a U shape, as Bill Holm calls it, and a split U shape, and that's the outside and inside of this. This is a kitch. A kitch is its wing, and some of you might recognize that from the name for the first city in Southeast, the quote salmon capital of the world, also known as my hometown, Kitchkhan. It's there's people who talk about what the name Kitchkhan means, and there's wings in that name interpretation. And then we've got T'ao Sha. So T'ao Sha is the head of a feather. And again, these are Tlingit terminologies that are describing anatomical parts, which all of these do end up being anatomical parts of the things that we will create. So in Bill Holm's system, these are called the U shape and the split U shape. Okay, next form is the akuo. The akuo. And this in Tlingit would translate into English as its tail, like the tail of a fish or a bird. Bill Holm called that a trigon. And some others call it a trineg. And I'll get into why that is, in that if we look at that triangular or three-pointed form, it's also in the negative space of this drawing. So positive and negative are very important elements in design, not only for Formline, but in a lot of other things. It's not only what is drawn, but what is not in the drawn space or between the drawn spaces. So this trigon or akuo is a really common thing, and I'll bet that you're already thinking, yeah, I've seen those all over the place in Formline, and it's really a fantastic separator. Some of these things are separators because we don't want to have, we want to have all of our forms and our shapes have be distinctive. So this one is one that you'll find will make its way into a lot of your drawing and designs. Okay, dis yadi or dis yadi. I emphasized the wrong letter there. So this is the moon child, or the crescent moon, and that's what Bill Holm called it, was the crescent. So the child moon in Tlingit, dis yadi. And so that crescent, again, you see how this is a separator between two forms. That's the next to the last, and here is the last. It's the atsuk. The atsuk, which is its rib, translates to its rib, and it's the Bill Holm S shape. Now, its rib, you have seen these if you've seen many fish designs or whale design, killer whale designs. Some animals, some, on the side profile, you'll see these. And then sometimes on the straight on with somebody's, like a body and a torso, you'll see S shapes that look like they're, either on a side profile, you'll see them, front to back on the body, where you might imagine ribs to be. And then sometimes they're in the torso, and there's pairs across from each other, all symmetrical. So atsuk. And then there's, this one's a tough one to say for me as still a new student relatively, but it's gi. That's a tough one. Gi. And that's skunk cabbage stamen was what it literally translates to. Also, Bill Holm called it cross hatching. Okay, so let's take a look at what that might look like. Well, you've seen that before. We can now see why they named it that, because if we look really closely at that skunk cabbage thing, when I was a kid, we just break them off and throw them like grenades around at each other playing in the woods. But you can see that cross hatching in there. And really, I just love the creativity of the folks that came up with this set of names, because really, when you think about it in our environment, what else would you name? Where else would you come up with cross hatching? And it's just really, I think this is a good set of names as a proposal of what one might use in alternative to Bill Holm's words. And I really do respect and admire Bill Holm's work. I just want to add an alternative. So we're getting into it now. Okay, so when it comes to drawing an ovoid, what are the ways to draw an ovoid? What's the easiest way to draw an ovoid? Well, I think that the best way to do it when you are new at it and you can't just grab a piece of paper and start drawing an ovoid. What one should do is draw, like these blue-green lines here, a square, or I mean a rectangle. It could be a square, but whatever your proportions are going to be. And as you have maybe seen with Formline, a variety of different shapes and proportions of ovoids. This right here is probably on its way to being one of the type of ovoids that you see commonly, something that's, maybe about twice as wide as it is tall, or somewhere in that vicinity. That's what this would look like. But what I want to say is, if you draw this grid, what you're going to find, and I believe in my personal preference in design, again, going back to having ovoids that have a good, strong posture to them, I think that the top curve goes from the middle. And we're just going to trace it and look at it here. From the very center, it's going to go out and be almost flat, going out just a little ways, maybe almost halfway across that. And then you're going to start curving down. And then that curve is going to intersect the side of your rectangle right at the middle height. Now, that's how you get this posture. If you have your center line, your horizontal center line too high, then it's going to look like a square. It's not going to really look like an ovoid. If it's too low, it's going to look flattened or smashed or, you know, kind of, I don't know, mountain shaped or something. And then when you get down to the bottom, you're going to see that it has that kind of really tight corner down there. One thing I want to tell you about this is that these two curves are actually the same curve by and large, and for the way that I draw them. So if you took that little small curve and then rotated it 90 degrees and enlarged it a little bit, you'd see that it's basically the same curve as the top curve there. And let me see, I should just get my little sketching tool here and say, okay, so again, like I said there, you're going to come out nearly flat across here. And you want to be like right at the top, right at the very end of it, you want it to be pretty much flat. And the reason why is because when you put the other side on there, when you mirror it, if it's not flattened out right here at the top, then you're going to get a little peak, a little point at the top. You don't want that. That looks, you're going to go, oh my goodness, ah. And then that's where you're going to get your eraser out and erase that. You're going to have to be used to erasing because that happens an awful lot. One of the things that I'll say is it's so rewarding though to get a ovoid that you just like the look of it. And if you're like me, you know, you'll draw an ovoid that turns out really well and you'll be like, yes. And then you might have a moment where you feel pretty good there and you realize, oh yeah, ovoid's just part of the drawing. But that's the heart and soul of this whole system is the ovoid. So we come out just a little ways, just flat for a tiny bit right here. And in my drawing, you might be able to perceive that it's just that little bit there. And then it starts to gradually go down and then it picks up speed going down. And then it touches the edge at the midpoint and then it comes down and it kind of does the opposite progression of the curve that the one we just did. It goes down, 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 and then it picks up speed and then it comes back across. And you'll see that the bottom here, one thing that doesn't happen a whole lot in Formline design and Formline drawing is flat lines, not on an ovoid. Now, so the bottom, you know, some people draw them flat, and I guess it depends on, you know, what's being done, if it's something more like a graphic design type thing, or if it's a drawing. The thing that I'm saying about that little teeny bit of curvature here on the bottom is that it gives it just an organic feel. If you get straight lines, things start feeling like rigid and they lack the kind of organic movement. And that's one of the things that Robert Mills talks about a lot when he teaches this class, is that you really want your designs to have movement in them. You don't want to have any part to get stagnant or stiff. So that's where this just ever so subtle lift in the bottom happens. And here, my quick sketch drawing, that looks like this line comes up and then it goes back down. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to come up and be slightly almost flat right at the middle point, so that when we mirror it, we're going to end up with a nice ovoid. Now, here's another alternative to, I need to close this and then I can go to my next slide. I added a little line here that some people do. Some people draw a little slope of a roof or something on here. I've heard people talk about it as, you know, like the clan house, where it's doesn't come to a point at the top. It's got a flat spot where there's the smoke hole or whatever. I don't know. I just go with, well, you know, you could draw a line there. And in this system, if you're going to draw a line there, what you would do is, I think that what works really well is to draw an angled line from the midpoint of this top section here to the midpoint of, you know, this top vertical section to the midpoint of this one. And by drawing a line between those two, if your line comes out and then it intersects there in the middle of that line and then comes down, that could be a little bit of an assist for beginning to draw ovoids. So Question is, does your walk or your ovoid have good posture? Definitely want to make sure that you have that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a chance to begin. Let's just start practicing those, because that's what this is about. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes practicing. And so right now I'm going to set a timer and take your time. And we're just drawing halves of them right now. We're just going to draw halves of them. And you can draw your little rectangles or squares. Try also to do different proportions of them, so they can be taller or flatter. But what we want to do is challenge ourselves to get these two curves, the top curve, the kinde, and then the bottom curve, the yinde, to follow this basic template. Okay, my timer, I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. 10, we'll do 9.5 minutes from now. Ready, go. Okay. And then I'm going to go over here, stop sharing. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to do this one. This way to and maybe mirror this. Oh, yeah. There we go. Okay. So sometimes people ask the question, do you start at the top, middle, or the bottom, or where? When you start drawing your line? Yeah, anywhere you want to. I find that pulling is easier than pushing in terms of getting accuracy. So, you know, when I'm drawing, I often am trying to do pull strokes. I feel like in my career of drawing, starting with architecture, I've always found that I can get a better line, whether it's a straight or curved line, by using the ergonomics of pulling rather than pushing. For some reason pushing just I can't get the same accuracy. So when you think about that, when you're drawing an ovoid, perhaps you will think about what direction you're moving in, and does that direction end up being a pulling or pushing motion. I'm putting myself to the test live. I did it. That's a risky move for a teacher. So yeah, we just began, and again focusing on, we're going to come out to like almost right just on that vertical sideline. But you could see my drawing that I just drew here. It's real. There's a little teeny gap down here. You can't see it in the video, but or on camera. But one thing we want to do is try to have our ovoid be all curves, no straights. So you can have even a tiny little bit of curvature, and that satisfies it. And I'll tell you that the difference is that it just makes a drawing feel more organic, more alive, and less mechanical. Now, I'll say that there are some artists out there that do fantastic graphic artwork, and they have stickers and different prints and different things that have some straight lines in them, and they seem to pull it off. And the reason why I think they pull it off is because they're really good. They're really good. But you'll notice when you look at a variety of different works that that most of them have a real organic feel to them. This thing as well. Other tools that are valuable, if one does not have this, you should get one of these. The brand name on it, and I don't get any money from these people, but I wish that I could, is Westcott. And I think that the Westcott ruler with the grid in it, 1/8" grid, is the best one that I've found. I found others that have grids in them, but this ruler, transparent ruler with an 1/8" grid in it in both directions, and it's a 2" wide and a 12" long ruler. It's very good. They have 18" rulers too of this type, but this is a very useful tool when it comes to beginning to do your layout work. I use this also when I'm carving. So a little bit over, got 4 minutes and 15 seconds left. So we'll just keep on working on practicing these ovoids, and then we will continue on from there. And again, like I said, you know, it's some of these things, it's just folks want to wonder why I have so much practice. Now this is the first time teaching this Formline class, but in other things that I do, and in my regular work life, from September through June, I am a high school teacher. And I have my students practice stuff all the time. And they're like, this is stupid. I already know how to drive a nail. Because, well, that's one of the most basic skills of my students. I'm a construction teacher. And I have my students drive an awful lot of nails before we build things. And I'll put a board, a big beam on sawhorses in the shop and just put a bucket of nails next to it with framing hammers there. And that's there an awful lot of time. And I'll, you know, tell students, you know, if you get bored or you get, you know, where you need to just take a break from what you're working on, go over and drive some nails. And, you know, it is very good practice. And there's a lot of things when building or drawing or anything else that is hand-eye coordination. And while many skills do translate, ovoid drawing is one of those ones that you just got to put in some time and practice. And so we have 2 minutes left. And some of you are drawing complete ovoids, and I appreciate that. We will be doing, you know, the actual complete ovoids in as well. So there's going to be a lot of practice, lots of practice. We're really just working on half, the right or the left. And, you know, honestly, if you do like I do, you just draw the left-hand side because you're right-handed. And that's, for me, that's kind of allows me to pull the top curve. But some people draw the right-hand side first. And that is a good practice thing to do as well. I will say that there are times when that really helps out a lot, especially when you get to the point of being able to freehand an entire ovoid. You'll need to be able to draw the other half of it. Now, some folks say, well, I'm just going to use the symmetry techniques that we have, which I'm about to talk to. Got 1 more minute of practice here. and they'll use the symmetry techniques and never freehand the other half. And that's okay too. Whatever you got to do, however you're going to do it for yourself. So, okay. And I put my timer on the screen in case you're like, how much time do we have left? Now, honestly, if you feel like the way that I'm talking to you is if though you're a teenager, you're just gonna have to like bear with me because that's who I talk to all the time. And you know, I'm not trying to talk down to anybody. And you know, that's one thing that's in my life outside of teaching, like with my own kids. My son is 21 and my daughter's 18, or you know, anybody else. Oh my goodness, that was abrupt. They will say, why do you explain everything? You repeat yourself. Like, I'm not dumb. I understood the first time. It's also a force of habit because I can do instruction at school and the moment, and almost sometimes it's like literally when I get done talking, some student in the class go, wait, what are we doing? Like, I just gave the instructions. Okay, all right. So we'll go back to, now that we've had some practice, and you don't have to stop practicing, but I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the share screen here, and we're gonna look at the next slides. Okay, so that is just a little bit of a help there. So then as we go into the, back up. So the question is, when you're looking at your drawings, does it have good posture? Do you feel like, and from what I can see from here, they're pretty good. And that's what we're looking for. I'm gonna get up so that I can see a little bit more, and I'm gonna give feedback. And one of the things that, for those of you who are in distance, you could maybe we can share your screen and I can look at what you've drawn, but I'm gonna look at what's in the folks here. And one of the things that I think is really important, and sometimes people get a little bit nervous or anxious or even might feel hurt that they get feedback. And that's something that I'll apologize ahead of time for, and also say that how will you improve if you don't get some feedback. So we'll look at these. Those are looking pretty good, and you're already drawing the inner. To me, that begins to look a little bit flat right there, just a little bit. We've gone up a teeny bit more to get this. I mean, like this one. That's the difference between those two. Love this one, don't love that one as much. But looking good. And you know, you're looking pretty good here. I'm going to say that this one looks a little bit on the round side, and how that can get a little bit more structure to it is if that corner was pushed out just a tiny little bit, just a tiny little bit. This is looking pretty good. That might be a little bit low, but it looks pretty good. You'll find that, you know, there's an awful lot of artists out there, like their ovoids look very similar to yours. So you're starting to see on the inside of here is it looks more like it's lacking the classic ovoid shape. And that's influenced by your outside, because that translates to the inside, right? So, yeah.
Okay. I like the first one I did, the others I'm not very happy with. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that line doesn't help.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I put it up there because some people say, well, so-and-so taught that.
Yeah.
You know, I maybe you sensed it in my comments. I'm not a real huge fan.
Yeah, no, I tried.
But it looks like you're getting it there. Okay. That line looks very vertical, very straightish. Yeah. So coming in just a little bit slower towards that edge. Okay. And this one here is looking pretty good. It might separate off a little bit lower, and this might come in a little bit lower also. Okay. But you're getting it looks like you really got a good posture there. Yeah. And then here, looking pretty good. We're looking a little round, and a little bit less, you know, like this here. That one should come down a little to the, you know, right down to this bottom line and come across. That top shape right there, it's really good. That one right there. And then these ones, this looks almost the same, right? And we want this curve right here to be different from this curve right here. Now, I'm going to show something. You're all on track though. That's the thing. You're all on track and it's your early practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my screen sharing for a second and let's see if anybody wants to share their screen. And it might be kind of hard because if you have a laptop and you don't have another camera, you might just have to hold up your drawing to the camera if you would like. If you're not wanting to show it on camera, that's okay. So I don't see anybody jumping at the opportunity. Okay, here we go. There's one. Now I'm going to pin it. Hang on just a second. I'm going to pin it so that it's big on my screen. Add pin. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It almost looks like that top curve though on yours. Your top curve needs to come out a little bit more towards the edge there. It looks like it comes in a little bit late, but it's looking really good. You're looking good. Looking good there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce you guys to an idea that I discovered myself. I do not know if anybody else has ever done this. I've never seen anybody do this. Amy raised her hand. Good. Go ahead, Amy. I don't know if I have my volume up, so I don't know if I can hear you. Yeah, my volume is up and you're on the, go ahead, Amy. We're gonna pin you.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly how to show you my picture.
Well, if you turn on your camera, can
Yeah.
you turn on your camera? And then-
Well, oh, I might lose you though.
Okay.
Try that, huh? Can you see
Yeah,
that?
because I cannot. So right now, all I can do is see your name. So it's like you're on Zoom. In the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom screen, there's a mute and then a video thing, and then you should be able to turn on your video, which will then enable the camera in your computer to then turn on, and then you would have something
Oops.
to hold your drawing in front of.
Oh dear, I think I've lost you. I tried to turn on the camera and now I'm gonna have
Oh,
to
no.
find the Zoom again. Sorry.
Well, I can definitely hear you, and it should be right next to the mute button that you unmuted in order to turn on your sound so that I could hear you. Right next to that should be a video one. So I am not sure how to get you back to what you're.
Well, yeah, I'm on iPad and I was just looking to see if there's an icon that says Zoom. I mean, I somehow lost you.
Well, I'd be
But,
glad to help you because if they had Wi-Fi here, but I don't, so I can't connect my iPad here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how that would work.
Well, you carry on and I'll just see if I can get back to the class.
Okay, I'll mute you since
Thank you.
it might take a minute for you to get, so I'll get you muted here and then I will continue and maybe we'll figure it out. Okay, so if I'm going to remove the pen here and then go back to my screen. Now, if one wonders, well, what kind of shape can I use to reference the curves as a reference for the curves in an ovoid? I was inspired a while back by my friend Lily Hope as she talks about weaving. And as it turns out, the way that she was taught weaving and design and the elements that they include in their weaving, one of the things that you'll never see in her weavings or in her lineage of weavers, in other words, the people that teaches her or who taught her, is you'll never see a hand. And it goes back to the belief that their hand is seen in their work, and that their hand is evident in the product of their work. And I thought, what a beautiful concept. And I also thought, well, geez, in Formline designs, you see human hands all the time. And you don't see any human hands in Chilkat weaving, or at least in Lily's lineage of weavers. And I thought, what way could my hand be introduced into my Formline design? Apart from just that, yeah, it's my hand that's drawing these things. And this is how this came about. I just looked at my hand, and I held my hand up, and then I saw the shape. Now this is upside down and backwards, so let me just put it. Look at that shape there. In the crook between your thumb and your index finger, if you hold it up straight, and I'll hold it up for you guys, that's kind of like the bottom curve of the ovoid right there. And so another way that you might just get yourself in a, I have this really great idea that each designer could end up formulating their signature Formline ovoid based on, because we're all going to be a little bit different here. We're all going to be a little bit different in this anatomical space. But if you make that, try to make as much of an L shape as you can with that, you're going to find that between the knuckle, this middle knuckle of the thumb, and the end knuckle of the index finger, you're going to get a pretty nice little curve. And what I actually did when I first started thinking about this is I just did this thing. I drew from that knuckle to that knuckle, and look at what it turns out like on my paper. And it's going to turn out something like that on your paper. Now, how much you have to spread it apart or relax that may vary, but that's a really good bottom curve of an ovoid. And then it's going to, how you come from this knuckle, how it comes to this knuckle, and then it starts to go up quite a bit. Well, we know the bottom of that ovoid doesn't have a concave bottom, so you have to just reach that point somewhere around this knuckle and just flatten it out. Make that only a very slight. And then on the top, I wondered about this. I wondered, can I just do this? Can I just put my hand there? And what will that look like? If I do that, it works okay with my hand, but it doesn't work perfectly, because I end up with something that is going to end up being a little bit of a squarish ovoid. But what I did think about there is, how could I continue to do this signature my hand ovoid? I just took my hand and did like this here, where you put your fingers straight, and then I just started with my fingertips and started curving it there. Not like this, not curving down low, but curving like I'm trying to pull the first knuckle of my fingers, pull that into a curve. And when I did that, I get something that's really close to, if I put that on there and put this knuckle right here, the edge of my hand, right at that midpoint, and I put it right there, and then I trace that, then I end up with something that if I can continue to extend that around, now I'm going to start getting an ovoid that looks like an ovoid. Now, I didn't really put up a grid here to try and make sure that it was vertical and everything, but you get the idea. Now, I'm hoping to, I really do have a grandiose idea here to hopefully launch a different way of thinking of ovoids. Are people going to continue to draw ovoids the way that they always have? Yes, but I think it could be really cool if every artist had somewhere embedded in their designs something that was from their hand. And I don't know, that's coming from a person who loves to go into museum collections, and I love to look at really old stuff, and I love to think about where did that come from. and what kinds of things were encoded by the ancestors in the work that they did. And I think that there was all kinds of things encoded, and we just don't know what those are. And so this is a way that I just have this idea that as I become more familiar with the ovoid from my hand, I could end up with a signature ovoid. So I'm just telling you, I'm not telling you that that's the way to draw an ovoid. I just want to introduce you to that idea and just think about it. Think about, and then also, if you're really wondering what that bottom curve looks like, maybe just look at that. That's real close. I think we can all do that. We can all, and that gives us a good idea of the curve, that really nice organic bottom curve. The top curve is a little bit harder, but that bottom one, it goes from, just about vertical to it's coming down, and then it really shoots off at the bottom. And so that can be a reminder for you that just right there in front of you, a template for what should the bottom of my ovoid look like. Now, does anybody's hand not do that? Yeah, your hands are no different. Now, sometimes the thumb doesn't flex down far enough. You gotta push it down. Maybe it's gonna have to be it's interesting, and I know that that's an issue, because on my carving hand, this one right here, so there's this meaty section of your hand right here. The one on my carving hand is like a lot thicker and tougher than the one over here. And consequently, my two hands don't flex the same, because this is the one I'm gripping a knife with all the time. So flexibility in those things can affect that. And that's why I just make it as a suggestion. But I'm hoping that over time, as I teach Formline, there's going to be more and more people that are going to be like, yes, I'm going to have a signature ovoid. Now, I want to jump off from that and suggest that regardless of whether it comes from your hand or not, you should have a signature ovoid. And if you look at any number of artists' work, if you look at their work enough, you can recognize their work without ever seeing the name. There's a handful of people that I can just recognize it. I mentioned Alison Bremner earlier. I can recognize her work easily. It's just, there's something about it. And I haven't broken it down to figure out what those things are, but I can see her work. I can see both of the Boxleys' work, and a few others. There's just, and it's because of signature elements that they have in there. The posture or the erectness of their ovoids, the thickness or thinness of the form lines, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the signature ovoid is part of that. Okay, let's go back to the slideshow and progress through here and see how we're doing on time. We're halfway into this class session, and we are doing pretty good. So that was the slide on your hand. And so we did some practice already. I want to get to symmetry. That's the next thing, because we've only really drawn a half of an ovoid. Now, how do we get symmetrical? Because you've not seen an ovoid. I don't think you ever will. I can't say always, and I can't say never, because those are both really pretty dramatic statements to make. But anything leading right up to that, I just don't see in any evidence of any of this having ovoids that aren't symmetrical. With some exceptions, sometimes an ovoid, part of one side of it gets broken off or changed in order for it to merge into another form line element. So there you see some asymmetry, but the right and left side, if imaginary lines were drawn in where maybe part of it is cut through by another element, you'd see a symmetrical ovoid. And so how do we do a symmetrical ovoid? Well, obviously there's tracing. And so for many of you, I guess the folks that are online, and this is something I hadn't anticipated as much, that you may not have tracing paper, and I'm gonna have a remedy for that in a moment. Anybody here have tracing paper? Some people do. If you don't, I have some sheets of tracing paper right here. I'll just throw some tracing paper on the table if anybody wants to use that. And then I will demonstrate how one will use tracing paper to make a symmetrical ovoid. And then I will also, on your walk, show how you would do it with just a regular piece of paper. So obviously, so we're going to do tracing, transferring, and templates are the three things that we're going to use for this. So starting out here, I put on that first ovoid that I drew, and I'm going to see if I can, is this, yeah, it does flip around. So this one here, if I just put a piece of trace paper over the top of this, what I can do is just get down to the corner, and I get to be like a miser with my tracing paper. So I'll just use a little tiny bit of it so that I can end up using the whole tracing paper. So what I'll do is these lines are your registry lines. And if you have a symmetrical box, then it's going to work. But if I make a little line right here, I'm tracing through the vertical line that I put on my paper and then the horizontal line. Then all I have to do is trace that first one, the side that I do have. I just trace it, and then I'm going to transfer it. And the way that happens, once it's traced, is I take my piece of paper, my tracing paper, and flip it around on top of my paper. And then I line up my registry lines. And then I just draw on the thing that I just drew. And by drawing on that, it's going to transfer the graphite from my pencil onto the paper below it from my tracing paper. And by doing that, I'll see that it fills in those lines that did transfer. You can kind of see where mine transferred. And then when I just pencil that in, because the transferred graphite is usually just not as dark as what your pencil would make, then you just trace that in and you will have a symmetrical ovoid. And so my initial rectangle, even though I eyeballed it, you can see that it's not perfect. I'm going outside the lines a tiny bit there, but my eyeball is pretty close. Then about a 32nd of an inch, which I'm very thankful. As I got into Formline design and drawing and stuff, I had a lot of practice in architecture and in construction prior to eyeballing things, and it has served me well as a new Formline artist. And for those of you who are just getting into it, there, I believe, are going to be a lot of experiences you have that will translate in some way or another to some element or another of being in Formline. So what you have a chance to do now is make all of your ovoids. Let's do some, using this technique, do some drawing of symmetrical ovoids. Practicing symmetrical ovoids, and I'm going to reset the timer. I'm going to give us 10 more minutes for that. The time is going pretty quickly here in the class. Since you already started, I set it for 9.5 minutes. So we're at 9.5 minutes to be practicing making symmetrical ovoids. And then after this, I'm going to show another method that I really love. Go get a drink.
When I first started my whole voice, I'm just gonna start a Polaroid phone collection. Your signature, yeah. That's what I was thinking, because I just couldn't. Just had to do my drawing class, so you just had to do everything free. When the boss pulled up, I'm like, this is cool. I like to do it.
Me too. And this last couple of years just really screwed me up. So I'll think about an upcoming project. I'll make sure that I order what he likes. Let's just order a whole crap. Running out. Very inopportune times. And I'll go over to the 2x4s. Wow. 11 2x4s.
Yeah. Cool.
Mine is definitely gonna get an electric race with a bunch of tips. Yeah.
I ever get serious.
I think we just need one.
How many you ordering?
Seems like the racers on pencils are never worth a damn. They get hard or something like this. These things.
Last one.
It's cool.
I like those.
Well, she had some, those white ones, but they get like dirty lead, and then you go to erase, and then you let it in the paper. Yeah. It's old. Yeah. That's cool.
There were moments where
Yeah.
not an option that's on the table. There are things you do to make it all right, let's see what my timer is. Oh, we got 3 minutes left. And I know you're like, is that? I've already got enough practice. I'm an expert.
And it is very good. I mean, this is such a fundamental for us, that, they're getting plenty of practice is a good thing. Freehand, using the tools that you have available to you, such as drawing rectangles that you're going to be your outer perimeter, your center lines, and those kinds of things that really help you to, have your structure for things. And that's really good. And then those are the training wheels, so to speak. And then you'll get to a point where you might just draw a line, and that will be maybe the center line, and you'll be able to draw a symmetrical ovoid without, freehand, without those. The moment that I do it on camera is going to be a moment where I won't be able to do a freehand one, but I'll just do a center line, and then I'll come over and try to draw a symmetrical ovoid. I know I'm not going to succeed, but I've drawn an awful lot of them, and I have a pretty good eye developed over time. That's a freehand attempt right there. It looks okay, but it's not perfect, you can tell. And I can put my little tracing template. Look how similar it is to the first one I drew, though. It's a muscle memory. See how close this is to the one I traced over here? And then when I flip it over, you can see now we got a top corner here. The top corner is off of symmetry. So it's really tough to do. And so that's where, I emphasize these tools. And I don't know how many ovoids I've drawn. I've drawn at this point thousands of them, but it's off a little bit there. What's that? Yeah. So that I just fixed it, but it was off by that amount right there. Yeah. And then on this side, it was right on.
What kind of pencil do you use?
So when it comes to transferring, there are the number 2 pencil, that's the regular pencil that everybody has, is the equivalent in the hardness scale. And I'm glad that you asked that question. It's something that I forgot to talk about. But this right here, it says HB. Let's see, HB. And then regular school pencil, number 2 pencil is the same as an HB. The H and B ratings have to do with the hardness or the softness of a pencil. So the scale of softness goes out to be softer and softer as you get into higher numbers of B. So here is a pencil that you can't hardly read it because I've used it a little bit, but it's a 6B. If I mark with that one, it doesn't take very long for me to get a real heavy graphite buildup. Let's see if I can. There's a heavy graphite buildup with a 6B. The HB, okay, all right. Stop. Okay, the HB, if I draw about trying to do the same hardness, it doesn't show up as much. And this one smashed, the 6B smashed flatter, just kind of like smeared out is a word that I could use much quicker, because that 6B is a softer graphite than the HB. Now, that being said, the HB is great. The number 2 pencil is fantastic. As you get your softer pencils, and I like 6s, I have one here that I use. This is an 8B and it's a fatty. And I use that to draw on wood. So when I'm tracing a design onto a piece that I'm carving, because it's softer and I can smear a pretty dark line on there. But the other thing that you get when you do softer lead is when you use the transfer method. When you use the transfer method, softer lead puts more, or softer graphite puts more graphite onto the paper, and then there's more graphite to be transferred. Now, I didn't really talk about transferring so much. We've been using trace paper, but the same thing could be done here on my piece of regular paper with a with a pencil. So I'm gonna just draw a little center line here, and then I'll do a quick ovoid. I'll try to do a little bit different shape of one this time. Now, if I just fold on that line, let's look at that line and try to make a fold right on that center line, which I did. I can kind of see through. It might not show up on the camera. You can just faintly see it there. If I was on let's see if I can get a white background underneath it, so this brown table might show up a little bit better. Yeah, see, it shows up a little bit better. Now what I do is I just look through there and I just transfer, just draw on that same line. And then I can unfold the paper when I get done with this, and I will have transferred, see how that 6B lead transferred pretty quickly on there, and then I can just color it in a little bit wherever it missed. And then what I will notice is anywhere where my making it symmetrical, I ended up with a peak at the top here, or sometimes it goes, you came down too much and it ends up with a valley, where that line came down too much in the middle and you end up with a little valley, or sometimes it came up too high and you end up with a peak and you don't end up with a flat transition right at the top or bottom. Right here, you can see I got a little point down. It just ever so slightly pointed down. So the way that I drew that wasn't perfectly, but so we do that, and that's the transfer method. So you can use your piece of paper. You can, you always, that's a really good method. Now, it's interesting how this transfer method gets used so much. I was just down hanging out with Tommy Joseph down at the carving shed at the historical park, and he showed me how he's got this big giant roll of I want to say acrylic, but that wasn't it. It's basically like a giant trace paper, plastic, and he uses kind of like a crayon, like a wax thing, and he draws on the pole, on one side of the pole, one axis of the pole, and then he has his apprentice trace it using that paper, and then he flips it over to the other side and then traces through it, transferring it, and then you have the design transfer to the other side, and then a symmetrical pole. So this technique is a very common technique. We want to make sure that we find symmetry in that way. Now, here's another Tommy Joseph thing. When I was down there hanging out with him on Sunday, he was carving a thing, and I was like, "What are you making over there?" And he says, "I'm making templates." And I was like, "Cool, that is such a great idea." This is a little chunk of red cedar that were, from chips, offcuts from the pole itself. Got a big pile of different things, and he split it down to a certain thickness, and he was making these. And so I decided to make one, and this is the one I made. And so here, if you have a template, you're able to just do this, and you have a symmetrical ovoid. Now, this is a kind of a flattish ovoid. I could have made a template of a different design. The thing that I think I have that is more practical for people rather than carving one of these, and incidentally, I carved half of it, and then I drew that on a piece of paper, and then I transferred that piece of paper onto the other half to get it symmetrical. So I use that same tracing and transfer method to get this to be a symmetrical template. But let me introduce you to the way that I think a lot of folks have done it over the years, and this is very accessible for us, and that's file folder material. And this is file folder that my welcome documents were in. But this file folder, they're already folded, so if you didn't want to fold it somewhere, you could just start at the file folder itself. Now, the issue that we're going to have here is, do I know that I'm going to have a symmetrical ovoid if I just draw on here and then cut it out? I don't, but I'll see if I can demonstrate what that might look like. So if I just start drawing an ovoid, and come down here, and I'm just gonna kind of draw it rapidly and actually not even try to get it perfect. And then I take my handy dandy scissors and just cut that out. If I cut that out, and then when I open it, we'll see what I got here. So I know it's not going to be right, but that's where you start with a ovoid template. Now, cut it out, almost there. And there it is. Now, moment of truth. Get a good background here. When I open it up, what do I have? I have something that looks a little high right there in the middle. Look at that. It kind of just, that bottom is pretty concave. Having it, just subtly concave so you can just barely tell is really what we're aiming for. We're not looking for concave and we're not looking for flat. We're looking for just barely not flat on the bottom is I think a beautiful ovoid. And then the top here looks pretty good. This top looks a little flat like my my red cedar template does. So what can I do to correct that? Well, I'm just going to come over here and get my scissors and shave a little bit of that concavity off of the bottom. And let's see what that looks like now. Much better, maybe not perfect. Let's see how that looks if I draw it in. And if I draw it, trace that. I really highly recommend templates. Now, that's coming from somebody who spent several months of drawing without using templates at all. And to this day, I still don't use them very often, but every time I get deep into a project, I think I should have templates because they save so much time. I mean, I can make a template that's symmetrical and the right shape of ovoid that I want. Then I can draw it again and again and again and again. Okay, so that's another technique that we want to definitely keep into consideration. We have our transferring, we have our tracing, and we have templates. So let's go back over to the presentation slides. So we have symmetry, tracing, transferring, and templates. Then my next slide, what did I have for my next slide? Practice, and we've been practicing, so that's good. Now, okay, this is the final stage of today's class, which you're like, oh my goodness, we'll spend 2 hours on just ovoids. Yes, and that's me saying I'm doing a quick class, a quick class that you just spent 2 hours on ovoids. Yeah, yeah. Where you can just freehand it, and it's interesting how that works. I asked Tommy that question, kind of having a sense of how he does things down there, and Tommy just freehand stuff because one, he's been doing this stuff for 50 years. He'd be mad at me if I go on bragging about how awesome he is. So I'm just going to say, highly qualified individual who, his work speaks for itself, and that's how he chooses to have it. And I admire that very much. So then let's make it Formline now. So what you see on the screen now is the generic ovoid idea. You're going to end up with a Formline that when you go around the from the bottom around to the top and then back to the bottom, we have thin, and then we have thick, and then we have thin. It's really simple. And a really good rule of thumb. Now, if you're Haida style, they put some pretty thin lines. Tsimshian, they have a lot of, from what I can tell, a lot of range in their form lines. and Tlingit style is pretty thick, real heavy, nice thick top. This is a nice middle ground. I have XX and 2X. So you can see that X is just that generic placeholder for a thickness. And then the 2X is double that thickness. So at the top there, if it's twice as thick as the bottom is, and the sides are also at that point where we get to about the midpoint of the, the height of it, it tapers down. So we can see that 2X tapers down, and then it reaches that X thickness somewhere at the highest, at the midpoint. So get my tools out here. So, yes, absolutely. Use your ruler.
Yeah.
Yeah, use your, oh, come on. This does this every time I use these computers. Definitely, oh, I don't have the project. Yeah, definitely use a ruler of any kind. And then start experimenting. And that's going to be in the homework tonight, but is experimenting with your proportion. One thing that you shouldn't have, and you will not have in Formline, is a line, a form line that is the same thickness all the way around. In other words, this is twice as thick at the top than it is at the bottom. You're never going to have the same thickness all the way around. And then in the other elements, these are lines that are changing in thickness as they go. And that's, again, that movement thing. If you stay static, two parallel lines, it doesn't look right. It's not the system. It's not what the ancestors developed over the centuries. So this is what you'll do, is you'll start drawing into the interior of your symmetrical ones. And some of you have already drawn full ovoids, but we're going to do some practice on that for a few minutes again, and we'll make full ovoids. Now, if you already have full ovoids, you can make new ovoids. And now we're making Formline ovoids. And so they're not just this simple ovoid, it is Formline now. When we have a thickness, when you have just a line, that's called a fine line. And that fine line does make its way in. I'll go back to the screen here. Fine lines do get used. But for Formline, it's always, a filled space between two lines, whether it's the U shape, the ovoid, the split U, and then of course the crescent and trigon are negative space elements. And there are circles too. I don't talk about circles until the very end, because we're trying to make ovoids, things with movement. So yeah, I set the timer a few minutes ago, and we got about a little over 8 minutes left. I started in the last drawing section to go get my tea. So now I'm going to go get my tea. Oh, it's not in there.
Did your daughters get their baskets yet?
No, their birthdays are September and November. And what I've done is I've gotten a couple of abalone shells and some sweetgrass and sage, and I'm waiting for these feathers to show up that I ordered for them.
Tell me you're hiding the other day. Oh, Brent, our grandson came for a visit. She's, I gotta go hide something. What do you do?
I was hiding the end of the year, but
Oh, yeah.
Someday I'll plan a hike like that.
Kind of nice when you're retired and how it works.
I usually take July off just to catch up on things and
Yeah.
do what I want, and we never get this much done.
Huh. Something is really amazing, huh?
Yeah, when it's kind of not very nice outside. It's like, I think this is a leisure day.
What's your name? I'm Caroline. I'm Jamie.
Jamie. Michelle.
Michelle.
Peter.
Peter. Okay. You live in Central?
Oh, yeah, 30 some years now.
I think Dave put that class together with Dave Valerian.
If they ever take a class from Dave. I worked at the Pioneer Home for 20 years. You can see there. Yeah, I just retired a year and a half ago and I just found out I could draw. This is all new to me. It's kind of fun though.
How we doing? We got 3 minutes, 4 minutes left. Oh yeah, those are good.
Beginner's luck.
Looking really good. I would say be cautious of this top part getting out too wide.
Okay.
It looks like you're getting a little.
I kind of noticed that compared
I
to.
mean, it's you know, they all remind us of the end of a bread loaf somewhere. But you know, what you're getting a little bit too narrow here,
Okay.
and the widest point. I emphasize this one: the widest point of your ovoid should be the middle,
Okay.
on the vertical, not up at the top. So your wide point is too high there; it should be there.
Okay.
But those are looking good. You know, these are minor tweaks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the widest point is on the sides?
Yes.
Not at the top?
Not at the top. Yeah, it's halfway down. It's some folks will end up with you know, ovoids where the wide point is below the center and it looks like a smashed ovoid to me.
Right.
And this one looks like it's just maybe a loaf of bread coming out the top of the pan a little bit. But you know, these are all just minor tweaks. Yours is, you know, you have a comment on your own there, it's a little too round. But yeah, it's just practice. Yep. And this one here looks like we didn't come out far enough before we started going downhill. So it's starting to look too much like a peak. But it's looking good. And this one here this one came in a little too fast. Come down a little bit more and then come in, then that bottom would look pinched in a little bit. And it's hard to do. Jamie's drawn ovoids before. That's where you go. No, whoa, let's do that first one.
I think I did the opposite of you. I started off during the pandemic, online classes, and I did David Boxley's beginning and then Rob Mills's intermediate.
Yeah. I might have done intermediate with Rob Mills, but I can't remember. I did everything that I could, but a lot of it was at the beginning. It was just
Rob's was so short,
putting in time. Yeah, yeah,
but they were very different in their teaching style.
yeah. Yeah, this one for me, I feel very little pressure on this one because I'm just introducing it. It's just introducing it and just, given, sometimes honestly, having looked around, including, I should mute it before I say this, because if it's recorded, my brother might get mad. But I think my brother has had a chance to do a lot of his practice by taking another class. And if the only practice you put in is during the classes, you're not going to improve between classes. You'll actually regress a little bit, and then you'll pick up a little bit.
That's my problem.
And so that is a problem. And that's one of the things that's really good about classes or being in school is you're forced to practice it. I mean, like with my Tlingit language, during the school year, and I'm taking classes through UAS, I'm practicing twice a week during class session. The whole summer, I haven't practiced as much. But as it is with all of us and everything that we do, you only have space for so many things. And, a lot of folks, it's just, there's more things to do than we have time to do. And that's understandable. Okay, well, that was practice on making formline ovoids now. We were not making just the fine line outline or profile of them. We're making the second line, which then creates the form line. It has a form now, not just an outline. So that's, I think, if I understand Bill Holmes' writing, why he called it form line is because it has a form to it. All right, so on the next slide, and we're getting real close. We've got 20 minutes left in the class, and we just did some practice, and folks showed me. And yeah, I'm actually referring to the homework at this point. I thought that we would spend some time talking about the homework, and having said that a lot of times people don't do homework, they don't spend time. I have 20 minutes left where in this last 20 minutes, what I want folks to do, the homework is, and that can begin now, and I'm heavily suggesting that you do it now, is 10 ovoids, as good as you can, formline ovoids, as good as you can make them. I want you to experiment with the thicknesses. So make some that are, maybe twice as thick. See what it looks like if it's 3 times as thick at the top as it is at the bottom. Try to make ovoids that are narrower, maybe almost square in their overall, if you drew a line around them, and then draw some that are wider. And start figuring out what kind of a proportion works really well for you. The ones that I've shown on screen here or on my drawing pad here are actually very elongated from what I normally do. I normally draw them a little bit taller than what is on the camera here. Let me go back to that. Yeah, so this right here is just a little bit shorter than what I would normally draw. I think I'd probably normally draw something. What looks good to me on an ovoid is something that's more like that. That height, and then the inner coming into, and I tend to go a little bit more than 2 times. So you can see the thickness of this right here is, let's see, that would be right there and right there. So maybe about 2.5 is what looks good to me. So that's the homework. You can spend the next, we had 18 minutes until 4 o'clock working on that. If you were like
preoccupied in your mind about errands or things that you need to do, and you think that you're gonna work better at 9:30 tonight, of course, you know, do what you need to do. I just can't emphasize enough that if you want to get anywhere with this, there's only so much I can tell you, and then it's up to you. You have to do some practice. And so what better time than right now to work on and your objective is 10 of them. And that's going to be the pass fail for people. Did you do 10 or no? If you didn't do 10, then it's going to feel like you really may not be as invested as you could be in this class. And I'm just, what I'm saying right now is the same kind of thing that I always tell students is, you know, it's kind of pressuring you to be where you want to be anyway, because honestly, every bit of learning, you get out of it what you put into it. And if you don't put much in, you're not going to get much out. You know, there's certainly, I have students who, as high school teacher, who they do really well in school. And it's mostly because of them, not because of me. I try to present the information in an understandable and clear way that people can follow along and learn from, but only so much that can be done in that regard. I did talk about pencils. So the scale of pencils is very easy to find. Let's see, I'm going to escape that. Escape. Okay. And I'm going to go to oh, I didn't mention my pencil that I have here. The particular type of pencil that I use, my preferred pencil, and I showed this, there was a blue one that I showed that was the 6B. That's a Mars Lumograph. I don't know, I guess there's the Staedtler Mars Lumograph. They're like German pencils. They're just pencils, but I use a particular type of pencil most often called the Staedtler Mars Lumograph Black. And there's something about that, the black line of their pencils that makes a darker line than you might normally get with the hardness, any given hardness. But if a person wanted to understand, where's my Zoom? Here's my Zoom. If I do a share screen of this one, you can see on the screen here see if I can zoom it a little bit. No, I don't know how to zoom this one. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Oh, there we go. What in the world? Okay. So on pencils, you can see the example had it, and I scrolled away from it. Where are you? There we are. Pencil hardness scale. The 8B, this scale on Faber-Castell goes up to 8B. There are 9B pencils. Definitely have used those. Again, HB is pretty much the exact same thing as your number 2 pencil. And then on the other end, going the other direction, are the H pencils. If you want to carve without using knives, you can use pencils in the H range because they're so, the graphite is so hard, you're like really indenting your paper. It's just there are uses for them, but I would say that that's probably for folks that are doing some graphite artwork and they need a really super light touch. I don't believe that you know, these lighter pencils will have much utility to you in Formline early on. Now, if you are trying to do a very light design on a paper or on a surface, that you're going to come back over it with something more darker than maybe something in the H's might be useful to you, but HB and softer. And I think that the softness, if you just go right to 6B, that's pretty good. That's what I have. And I have used pencils, lots and lots of pencils. And in my pencil container here, I have HB, a bunch of HBs, a couple of 6Bs, a shorter 4B that I've probably had for a really long time and I just haven't used the rest of it. I got a tiny little 9B right here. And another tiny little 6B. But the point being, HBs and 6Bs are most of what I have in here. Like there's about a 4-to-1, about 4 HBs to every 1 6B. Those are the really useful pencils, HB and 6B, in my opinion, my experience. All right. What else can I share with you? Oh, while we're here. Any questions so far? Cancel that. Good grief.
Is Justin your brother?
He is my brother. He's my brother by 7 years, 7 years younger than me. He's also somebody who has been, I think he took his first Formline class just in the second session, the second group of classes that Rob Mills taught, which I think were the first online classes. I definitely was in David A. Boxley's first online class ever. And yeah, Justin has done some incredible work recently. He's a student at the Northwest Indian College and doing a lot of great research and learning on things. And he just, not yesterday, but a couple of days ago, spent a day as a demonstrating artist at the Burke Museum, having applied for and received one of their research grants, which basically covers the expenses for artists to come and research a particular thing in their collection. And he chose, his proposal was about paddles, and what he chose to do was, or what he proposed and did was to go in and catalog their collection, the Burke Museum's collection of Tlingit paddles, and he made templates of all of them. And he's digitizing all the templates so folks can download them and use the templates from what's in the Burke collection. And so
this would be available through the Burke Museum?
it might be, but I think it's going to be something that he's going to put on his website. And he made a website for me because he saw a mask that I made a while back, and he said, I want to buy that mask from you. Like the first picture I posted of it online. And I said, well, I'm not going to sell you a mask. Because really, I mean, I couldn't sell my brother a mask. Honestly, one of the principles on the artwork, and I think that it sells for, there is a market value to the artwork that Northwest Coast natives make. And I think that it's a shame when they compromise that value. So for instance, my mask that I just finished, the front of it, this one here, is about a $3,500 mask. I won't sell it for a penny less than that. And the reason why is not because I'm after the money. As a matter of fact, I haven't sold any of my masks, but because that's what it's worth, and that's what the professional artists out there that are making a living sell these for. And if my quality is as good as theirs, which I believe that it is on this mask, why would I undercut their value? So that's important. Now my brother, I'm not even going to sell my brother a mask for a reduced rate. So I said, what I'll do is I'll trade you. You make a website for me and I'll give you that mask. It's not this one, it's a different mask, but yeah, he definitely is a fantastic emerging artist in his own right, and done some pretty cool work there with the Burke Museum.
So,
What are the ones that
no,
please?
when you set a price for
Uh-huh.
an artist like yourself, sets a price, would that be, would you sell it in a gallery for the same price that you sell it?
Well, see, that's what happens is that they're actually, when retail outlets or galleries get artist work, the going rate, well, one that I can cite is that See Alaska Heritage Institute and their store in Juneau gives 50%. So when a item sells for $1,000, the artist gets 500. And so SHI or the retailer will set the price at what they believe it will sell for retail. But the that doesn't mean that artists should then do private person-to-person sales of that same item for $500. It's worth $1,000. If it's worth for $1,000 in the SHI store, the only reason why they would put it in the SHI store, or the reason why they do put it in the SHI store, I would imagine a leading reason is because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who go through their store. And that's what a retail outlet has to offer, is exposure and potential buyers. And so I think that's something that they do. There's other places. There are places here locally that are 60-40, 60 to the artist. And I like that. I like the sound of that, because when it comes down to it, a retailer that is going to give 60%, 60-40, is a retailer that says, we do have overhead and everything, but we want to acknowledge that without your work, we don't have anything to sell. We're not equal contributors. I think it's a pretty bold thing for a retailer. And, not a judgment on SHI that I just named, but it's just a bold move for a retailer to say that, okay, we're going to sell this thing and we're going to split it right down the middle. Our contribution as a retailer is the same as your contribution as a artist. That I don't agree with that. Now there's a couple of folks here locally that I know of that are 60-40, and one of them that I am acquainted with said that he would like for his shop to get to 70-30, 70% to the artist, and he's thinking about how that might happen. And a big ticket item, it's a matter of inventory space, right?
That's what I think when I sell art. And the problem that we're having right now, I mean, our overhead is huge, getting huger all the time. And we want to represent artists in the best possible way that we can. We're running into a problem with artists who are selling their own art online, wholesale, and then somebody will come into our gallery and say, oh, well, I just saw this online for half what you're selling for here, and I want my money back, or
I think that's a dangerous move by artists, and my opinion that'd be my opinion. I think without having seen this discussion again and again online, but as I've seen this discussion again and again online in places, social media places like Facebook, for instance, there are often a lot of artists that say, no, don't sell your stuff for wholesale. When you're doing an individual sale, sell it for the same price that the retailer would.
That's what I tell artists who want to sell their own work.
Yeah.
I said, sell it what we sell it.
Because for me, I think that if you're selling it for wholesale, you're in a sense giving it away. And so in the case of my brother, we worked out a barter, because I am not going to sell my brother a mask. I will give it to him as a gift, or I will do something in trade, but I'm not giving it away. The value is the value. And whether it's sold at a retailer, now, if it's sold at I know the rationale that an artist would have. The rationale would be, well, whether it sells at a retailer or I sell it person to person, the same, it's the amount that's the same if I sell it wholesale person to person, or if I just get my 50% cut from the retailer. That's the same. Yes, it is, but then it devalues it. And quite honestly, without the place, and that right there is kind of, I think, an idea that it dismisses the value of retailers in the market. And I think that the value of retailers in the market is significant. I do disagree that many retailers think that their value in the market is 50%. I don't think so. I think it's more like a 60-40. And you know, there's a couple folks here locally that if I was going to put my stuff into a store, it would be in their store. The 50% folks, you know, I'm sure we'll find plenty of artists to work with them. I'm not one of them.
So we're considering doing something like service fee or something like that, but I work really hard. And I pay a lot of expenses, but I work really hard at my job, and I do a lot of, communicating with clients. I do have a client base that I built up over 10 years of selling art for a living. I do a lot of research. This is fun for me. but
Yeah.
it's also research. It's learning what goes into a piece of art or a cultural thing.
Right.
I spend a lot of time studying this, so I value my contribution to promoting the arts. as well,
Yeah.
you know. So the biggest thing is the overhead.
Right.
So
And that is a big deal. I acknowledge that.
so I just encourage any artist, if you're gonna sell your own work, please.
Please sell it at the same, at retail,
Yeah.
or retail, or, you know, anything below retail, maybe some kind of barter rather than,
That was cool.
yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and, we can carry on with this, but it's 4:00, so, we will, resume tomorrow at 2:00, with the next session of this, and please, do some practice on this. 10 Formline ovoids is what we're shooting for by class time tomorrow. Thank you very much.